Hello, everyone, and welcome. Just kind of waiting here now for folks to trickle in and join the Zoom meeting room. But I just want to start off by welcoming everyone and saying thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar. My name is Christine Evans. I'm the Director of Product Marketing and Content here at Fictive, and I'm just going to be kicking things off for today. So in just a minute, we're about to get started with our discussion on the state of manufacturing. To get a feel for who's joining us today, please feel free to use the chat module where you can introduce yourself, maybe say where you're dialing in from today. And just a quick housekeeping note, if you want to chat to the full group of attendees, make sure to toggle your to field in the chat box to panelists and attendees. Also, quick note that at the end of the discussion, we're going to have time for Q&A for our amazing panelists that are here today. So please also use the Q&A module during the webinar to post your questions, and we'll make sure to spend time to address as many as we can. Glad to see people starting to come in and post in the chat. Welcome, Eric. Welcome, Jeremy. Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and start to kick things off now. So like all of you who have registered for today's webinar, I'm really excited to hear from our amazing panel of speakers to discuss the state of manufacturing in 2021. So each year for the past 6 years, Fictive has surveyed hundreds of manufacturing leaders in partnership with Dimensional Research across supply chain, engineering, R&D, and technology innovation to understand really what are the key drivers and the trends that are behind the manufacturing industry to unlock some of those key insights. And so the findings from our 2021 report showed a significant shift in strategic business priorities for manufacturing companies across industry verticals in response, not surprisingly, to the pandemic. So today I'm really excited to introduce you to some brilliant thought leaders in the industry to discuss these findings. So without further ado, let me introduce our 4 panelists for today. So today we're very grateful to be joined first by John Hobgood, the Vice President of Manufacturing Engineering at Honeywell Aerospace. Thank you, John. Hello. So glad to have you here. We're also joined by Michelle Putnick, Manufacturing Business Development Lead at Amazon Web Services. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, everyone.
Additionally, we have Jake Hall with us, founder and influencer for the Manufacturing Millennial. Welcome, Jake.
Hi, nice to meet everyone.
And last but not least, we have Dave Evans, co-founder and CEO of Fictive. Dave, being here.
Super excited, and I love getting to see where everyone's from in the chat. So please keep the chat coming in. It's great.
Awesome. Well, at this point, Dave, I will pass things off to you so we can start to dive into the discussion.
Fabulous. As Christine said, this is our 6th one that we've done annually, and it's amazing to see both the trends, but also looking at some of the results. And so what you're looking at on the screen here is that in our State of Manufacturing survey, we asked executives across the board what their top business priorities are. And clear trends that we've seen, year over year is looking at NPI, new product innovation, but also looking at sustainability. And these things held true. But I think what really surprised us in this year was the focus on driving resilience in supply chain. This shouldn't come as a surprise, I think. We just, have gone through a global pandemic and are still going through, but 65%, or 68%, almost 2/3 said that supply chain resilience was their #1 investment this year, followed by NPI and sustainability. So to kick us off, John, aerospace resiliency. I mean, gosh, I don't think that there's an industry that needs to prepare for this, rebound that's going to happen. What's your thoughts here? How are you and the team in the aerospace, field thinking about resiliency in your business?
Yeah, like you said, pretty challenging last year for us in aerospace, and what's exciting is now we're getting ready for the ramp up, right? As things start to get back to, where we'd expect things to be, and we've been driving a number of things here, Dave, around, do we have the right suppliers in our supply chain? Can we compress our cycle times in our supply chain? Maybe we're working on cutting those in half. And are we driving even the right manufacturing technologies to make things more robust against those disruptions that, things we can't always plan for, right? And so those are a few of the things that we're driving here.
And how do you think about, before I go, Michelle, to you, John, how do you think about preparing, in this case where, like, yes, we know aerospace is going to come back, but do you guys just hire a whole bunch of people? Are you thinking about changing your world? Like what does resilience mean, in the aerospace world?
Yeah, I think, I think all of us are starting to get more digitized. I think we're going to talk more and more about that. And I think the real key is understanding where those high impact areas are. In our case, for example, what are those aircraft platforms that are probably going to ramp up sooner than others? So I think companies, manufacturing companies in particular, really need to understand at a much deeper layer of detail about how you respond and react, and where do you improve your supply chain. There's clearly higher impact areas first that you need to make sure are more robust. So I think there's so much data out there nowadays, and there's
Yeah.
the problems we have to scale and things are can be so large. You really got to work on those highest impact areas first. So we've been focusing on certain product lines, certain types of platforms and things that we know are going to probably ramp up first, and you really need the right data analytics to do that.
Couldn't agree more. I think that if we contrast the aerospace industry with resilience, Michelle, I'll go to you next. I mean, Amazon, holy cow. I don't know if resilience is like trying to keep up with what's going on, but automation has always been a central theme, for supply chain strategy with Amazon. I think you shared some number with like the number of suppliers that you onboard per day. I just, I'd love to know, how do you see this in your world, both from an AWS and a data perspective, but also Amazon, and really what does resilience mean to you all?
Well, I think Amazon is a big customer of AWS's, obviously. We have a lot of other large customers as well, and I think most of them are expressing similar challenges and concerns. People that use Amazon to purchase things are accustomed to a certain amount of on-time delivery expectations, and if we say Thursday 2:00, it needs to show up Thursday 2:00, right? So, but that said, I mean, a lot of the automation that goes on behind the scenes is really critical, not only now, but has been critical for Amazon for a very long time. Automated routing, understanding where bottlenecks can potentially occur. New legislation, certainly in Europe, hit us in wonderful ways where you had a product moving from a warehouse in northern Italy and supposed to go to Austria or Switzerland. That should be a fairly straight route, but no, those borders were closed at certain moments in time, and you have to go through France and then into Switzerland and on and on. And you can't really sit and plan for that with people. You have to look for ways of driving that automation. So it's been it's been an interesting journey, to say the least, and also understanding what products are important during this time. All of a sudden, a lot of toilet paper was purchased all around the world, and accommodating for those peaks and valleys. And I think at the end of the day, what this has also highlighted when it comes to resilience is understanding what products do I have in stock? What should I have? What should I be making? What are customers asking for? What is true demand in a very uncertain time of what product mix, and maybe rationalize SKUs, and focus on the ones that are most important for now and for survival for many companies as well. So for some of these, resilience is almost a it's almost a new term in living and breathing with that. I think for Amazon's part, that's something that's been going on for many years.
Yeah, I think you have the benefits of, if John's a part of 100-year-old organization, that's, has to deal with ebbs and flows, Amazon has just continued to invest behind the data, and it's almost in the DNA from day one. But it sounds like even if it's in the DNA from day one, resiliency, it doesn't mean that you're not continuing to try and improve it. And, I think you were telling me something like 3,000 suppliers are onboarded a day, or 4,000, something like that at Amazon?
Yeah, that was a metric that I saw on a news post somewhere. But yeah, a lot of onboarding and as always in this case, we look for opportunities to automate the onboarding to make it consistent. What data points are we capturing with regards to when we think about sellers or suppliers in general? Because for many companies, it becomes a data problem. They're not getting the exact same information from every supplier. And when you start to have those types of discrepancies, you create this data challenge that's really hard to rationalize after the fact. And both onboarding, takes a long time. Offboarding takes a long time as well. In a world where this should be much more harmonized, much more streamlined, so that the data that we do capture in this, in that particular process is useful to us.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Jake, I'd love to get your opinion here. If folks don't follow Jake on social media or other channels, you get to sit at the intersection. I think drive and watch automation, Jake. What's your perspective on what are manufacturers doing, to prepare for resiliency? How do you think customers are approaching this? What trends are you seeing through your lens?
Yeah, I think when you look at manufacturing, the COVID pandemic really awoken a lot of manufacturers and how they're currently getting their products and supplied to them. Right now, when we're, I would say post-pandemic, where a lot of manufacturers are, I think as John mentioned, where there's the demand that's there, but the resources have not reached that demand yet. I think the conversation was Uber, right? Everyone's traveling again, but there's not enough Uber drivers to reach that demand. And that's the same thing manufacturers are facing right now. When I'm having conversations, it's the demands out there, the orders are there for continuously produced products, but manufacturers simply just don't have the labor to produce that product. They don't have the labor to fulfill those orders, where before, you look at manufacturing 5-10 years ago, competition was high, so people were consistently trying to be more profitable to make their bids lower to fulfill orders to get jobs. Now it's almost the opposite, where manufacturers now simply saying, we have these jobs, we have this availability, but we can't produce products. There's a few companies right now who are literally backlogged until, this is different from the aerospace industry, but for manufacturing of standard goods, November, December this year, they simply just can't produce the parts, even though they're working 7 days a week right now, 2 shifts. And it's not that they don't have the capability. They have 4 machines that just aren't running because they don't have the labor to run those machines. So it's interesting when you talk about, from Michelle's point of view, when you talk about automation, manufacturers now are turning to automation not to be more profitable, but to simply to meet the demand that the supply chain is putting on them, that they're trying to fulfill to get to that next level of manufacturing, whether that be automotive with tier 2, tier 3, or your consumer goods. So when you look at the resiliency of manufacturers, they're in recovery mode right now. When the industry shut down, a lot of manufacturing shut down with it. And now people necessarily who had jobs, who worked in manufacturing, might have just either said, well, I'm not ready to go back to work yet. Or they might have just said, well, here's a great opportunity for me now to go to a different industry. And that's what manufacturers are facing right now. They just can't simply get the labor that's needed to produce the products that the supply chain is wanting from them.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, from our lens at Fictive, you think about this idea of resiliency. It's not just resiliency of an OEM, like a Honeywell, or just purely the resiliency of, is the manufacturing ecosystem have enough employees or enough machines to deal it? It's actually like, how do you load balance this whole thing? And Michelle, we can kind of thank you or blame you, but our customers, engineers, they have consumer behaviors that have changed all of their professional expectations. So if I'm a design engineer and I'm building a product, I expect it to arrive like the Tuesday at 2 p.m. that you were talking about, Michelle. But then the reality is, Jake, you're saying, well, I placed that order and then there's a backlog till November, not because there isn't enough machines, but because there isn't enough labor. This is like the anti-resilience in some way. And it's almost like the consumerization of this professional, world. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but it's a crazy idea.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's that
Like
song where it's what is I want it now or something like that. John, you probably remember that, right? It's that idea of that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying though. But Amazon put that mentality in our head where before it was 5 days, now it's 2 days. Now I have an Amazon fulfillment facility that's 5 miles from me. I can get product in 2 hours if I want.
That's right. And on your phone, you said, "Wow, my package is 2 blocks away. It's almost here in 5 minutes." Why can't I expect the same thing in my supply chain, for that aerospace component, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it lights up another issue that Jake touched on, the balancing act between what is as near true demand as I can understand using new types of forecasting tools and technologies, and match that with what is my capability of producing against that, giving all the constraints that you talked about, Jake and John. And sometimes you look across a manufacturing organization, stovepipe organized, they have their own budgets to solve northbound to southbound problems, yet the east and west is harder to look at. So balancing the demand side with the supply side, I still think people are struggling with. I mean, I've observed over the last couple of years folks doing smart factory type of initiatives to drive efficiency, and that's great. But if all you're doing is more efficiently putting stuff into inventory for the hope that somebody's going to buy it, then we're not connecting the dots enough. So I think there's a good opportunity to do that certainly now.
Well, let's use this time, I think, to talk about labor, because I think we're circling around this issue here. As we talk about resiliency, we're talking about automation expectations that happens. John, we've been chatting a lot about this of how does labor needs change? How does leadership need to be different? In this kind of virtual world, I'd love to know, like, how does Honeywell think about this? I mean, you have to make one of the most complex engines or machines in the world, which is whether it's a power unit, an APU, or it's a jet engine. Are you guys having to approach your labor force differently as you think about this resiliency?
Yeah, for sure. I think, some of the age-old mantras are still true, but even more so today. I'd say, we were talking, Dave, you need to have leaders in place that can help manage and coach their teams through it, right? Which is even more important with this dynamic environment we're often in. So basic leadership, investing in, the management of your teams and your leaders, their skills and capability. And then, of course, every team member, are you building the capability that they have, to use these new tools, to be able to, manage all this data that's coming in, to make better business decisions. And, what's exciting with this technology, it's rapidly changing, and it's always been true, but even more so today, that you need to upskill your team members, and they deserve it. They always have, right? But now for sure, if a company's not investing in their people and these new skills to be able to manage these new digital threads and automation and the things that Jake talked about, I mean, you're not going to win in today's environment, for sure.
I agree. And Jake, any tips or pointers as you think about all the manufacturers that you talk to from a labor perspective? What's working or not working in that world? I see a robot behind you that's driving around. Like, are the robots just going to remove all these people, or what do you think happens from a labor perspective for the manufacturers?
Yeah, I look at it where manufacturers are now more focused on employee retention than ever before. It's no longer about, oh, we had a person leave, we'll just hire someone else. It's, oh, we had someone leave and there's no one to replace them anymore.
Just done. Yeah.
You know, and I was at a manufacturer, this was about 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to their HR person. They said, yeah, in the last month, we've hired 36 people and 38 have quit.
What?
And-
Hold on. I'm not, I mean, I think I'm pretty good at math, but 36 and okay. Got it.
And that's just, but that's the world that we're living in right now, where because of the demand that's in for manufacturing, and it's not even just manufacturing anymore, it's the distribution and the warehouse space that's attracting a lot of labor as well.
Mhm.
So when you look at your question, Dave, of how are manufacturers changing, they're focusing on employee retention, and by employee retention, they're saying they're investing in their employees to have more capability and skill to create value.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, it even goes to the idea of millennials, but that's how you're having this demand for, you know, controls engineers or robot programmers or skilled trades within manufacturing. You can't hire the people, so take the current people that you have,
Yep,
and train them to have that capability.
yeah, upskill them and level them. I love that. You know, part of the reason we do this survey every single year is to try and bring these topics to the surface. That yes, we're focused on resiliency, but for everyone listening, dialing in, watching this, these are core topics to be talking about with your companies, with your partners in your ecosystem. So I think two great perspectives, John and Jake. And you know, let's move to the next topic, because I think we could talk about resiliency and labor all the time. Another key trend we always like to look at here is new product introduction, NPI. And as we think about what's the investments that companies are doing here in 2021, in the survey, what we found was that actually it was internal processes was one of the major drivers that hampers innovation. It just like stepping back and thinking about this, why does a new product not get to market? It's not because a machine doesn't work or these things. 45%, so almost half of the executives said workflow was the blame, internal workflow. But what's interesting is the ecosystem is starting to shift. You see the data on the right there, where 84% of companies are now actually adopting on-demand manufacturing platforms. Fictive being one of those, where those benefits are quality, transparency, getting to, Johnny talked about that mobile app, getting to see where things are, speed being a huge benefit. You know, John, I'll start with you, and then maybe Michelle we can go. But how are you helping your teams move faster and think about things differently? You know, in a highly regulated industry, John.
Yeah, I think the key thing is, you know, these processes, legacy processes that many of our businesses have had, they were built for a purpose. I mean, for example, at Honeywell, we are going to be compliant. We're a regulated industry, you know, for a lot of our business in aerospace. And so we're going to make sure that we do things the right way around the world. So I know all of our companies, you know, want to make sure we maintain compliance and safety of our employees. So there's a reason these processes were built over time. But the key is, how do you continue to maintain that 100% compliance and safety of your team members and that resiliency we've talked about, but start to improve your business processes internally. Dave, one thing you and I've talked about is, you know, I like to call it sometimes a fast track process. I mean, maybe for your legacy business, or let's say your stable business, you know, those normal processes that you've had in place can function. But there's other areas where you may need this, you know, more of a, you know, a process that works very fast, or dedicated people or dedicated systems or tools that really help you adopt much faster results in your business. So that one of the ways we've done that is by work on those fast track processes or high impact areas, is for sure. And NPI, you know, I really appreciate you taking this topic in your survey, because in this last year, we've seen this more than ever before. I mean, Honeywell, we launched a UV cabin system, you know, that we never had before, and literally put it in the market in about a month. And we had to adopt some of these more, you know, rapid processes to be able to get those products to market. And I know many companies out there are.
But I appreciate this approach that you say, hey, we're in a highly regulated industry. It's not like you throw the baby out with the bathwater and all these processes that keeps us flying and safe doesn't mean that you throw them out, even with new technologies like on demand, but it's saying, can I build parallel workflows that are fast tracks? Like think about that HOV lane. So it sounds
Yes.
like in a company as large as Honeywell, you're like, I can still build an HOV lane where you can go fast, but we do it in a safe way. We adopt new technology. That's really transformational. I think that's powerful. Michelle, what are your thoughts here? I think Amazon's known for speed, but I love watching and how you guys leverage data to do this. How does AWS and how does Amazon think about partnering for this idea of building for speed or building for transparency?
I think it's, speed and transparency are a few important topics. Another one is certainly in the manufacturing space is to take some cues from the consumer space, meaning we are grown accustomed to getting software patches and updates to our Wi-Fi router, our microwave oven, and anything that is software,
whatever.
Yeah, the Tesla and other manufacturers in the automotive space, and it's also about the lifetime of the product as you enter more of this service space, right? So it's not just, hey, we made this piece of hardware, we sold it, and that's the end of the relationship until they want to buy again. And that continuous improvement cycle of a product, and you're looking for a the longevity of the relationship, continued touch points, opportunity to drive a relationship. A lot of manufacturing companies struggle with that. The white goods industry is a great example. The automotive industry is another great example. If we take Tesla out of that equation, because they're doing seemingly a really good job at driving those relationships, but it's looking at the product over its lifespan. So yes, you might introduce a new piece of hardware with associated software, but the expectation is to continuously improve that software. And I think the folks in manufacturing that are focusing on quality on the hardware side, they tend to kind of take that and carry it over into their software development cycle. The product needs to be perfect before we can release any kind of software. Yeah. But this is more of an iterative approach. We will add new capabilities, add new features. The more data we get from the physical hardware, the more we can address the reality of the environment in which that operates, the more we can add to it from a software spec perspective. We may also take that data stream to inform our R&D department that we need to do some other things or choose some other materials because the product will last longer, or create less vibration, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of learnings here, I think, to be had, and I think the acronym is MVP, many times, right? I like to call it, minimum lovable product, so an MLP. When you have that, let's get it out. Let's get reactions. Let's start driving, relationship. Let's add another capability and another capability, and that's how I think you keep the innovation flywheel just going continually.
I love this idea that you're talking about, Michelle, where you actually take a manufacturing term, which is Kaizen, of continuous improvement, but then you put like software on top of it, where you launch a product where you actually are continuing to improve it, whether it's through software or it's through MRO, where you're repairing it and bringing it to a new life. But it's almost this paradigm shift, I think you're saying in NPI, where launch something that's your minimal lovable product, but then make sure that you're improving it all the time, whether that's through software. I think it's a really powerful message for how can on-demand manufacturing help there? How can software help as we release new products? Jake, one of the things I'll just go to you is you've shared a lot, I think, in publicly talking about this idea of how additive changes this world, but it's actually more about multimodal manufacturing, where you're seeing traditional integrators or machine shops have many different types of manufacturing processes now. Would love to just hear, how do you think that this multimodal way of manufacturing is changing NPI?
Yeah, so the title of the slide is accelerating new product introduction. I would also add product and machine introduction. Because when you're looking at manufacturers, it's or machine builders, they're designing and developing brand new equipment for automated solutions. So the idea of additive manufacturing, I think, is really unique and it's being more adopted. Last year alone, 8 million 3D printers were sold.
8 million.
8 million 3D printers were sold. So it's a technology that's continuing to grow, and it kind of falls under one of the pillars of Industry 4.0. But like behind me, for example, is a mobile robot. 80% of that robot is 3D printed.
Wow.
And the reason why companies are turning to additive manufacturing is that quick turnaround. When we look at organization, there's that report, right? Internal process hampering. I look at new product development is just the fact of getting your design made, submitted out. It takes 5 weeks to get back to you to say, well, wait a second, this doesn't work. We need to do something differently. That process just takes forever and ever and ever, versus additive manufacturing solutions or different manufacturing processes now are taking that super long lead time and dramatically reducing it. It's the same idea for not necessarily product prototyping, but even used in real world applications. Automotive industry, Class A nesting is very important, right? It's a surface that's not going to get scratched or have any deformation on it. Well, before, for a long time, they had to do, urethane castings, and doing this very labor intensive casting process of mixing epoxies together, pouring it into a mold, and handling that process. Well, now they can just take a TPU filament and 3D print a nest instead. So you're taking a very complex manufacturing process that was very labor intensive, and now you're just simply taking your 3D drawing, slicing it, and 3D printing it.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. I mean, I'm gonna, John, not to plug you all, but if you haven't been on LinkedIn and checked out what Honeywell just put out, they actually give you a tour of their entire additive lab. And so, like, yes, that robot behind you, is a lot of 3D printed. John, you're doing this in aerospace. I mean, Brian Bowman, your chief engineer, walks us through. This is one of the coolest videos I've seen. Is this changing your world too, additive?
Yeah,
John?
yeah. Thanks for the shout out there, Dave. Yeah, to add, Jake, I really appreciate your point here. You're transforming the supply chain, especially for these new product introductions, and we're putting additive parts, in the regulated industry now, making sure we're compliant. But like Jake said, you could print 3 versions of a part overnight, and in the morning do a quick test on it instead of just model it on a screen and really touch and feel that part. And get that in an engineer's hand to really see how does this interface with the other parts in the system, or you could 3D print all of them. I mean, and then I think for the sweet spot, again, that high impact area, there's certain parts, maybe if there's a quick robot iteration of the robot behind Jake there, they may have an upgrade in their system in the next month. And it's almost like that software app update you talked about, Dave. You can modify that part and print it in production a little bit different. So the product, in very short cycles, can be improved. So I think the key is in everyone's industry, where can you leverage that 3D printing? For some very large parts that maybe are some exotic metal, in some cases may not be the right part to additive print, but you better be exploiting those technologies like additive on the right parts in your products for sure.
I love this. I'm going to actually use this as a segue to go to our next slide, which is all about adopting automation. I think a lot of times when we're talking about additive, like additive and automation are right here, kind of hand in hand. But this was kind of a crazy statistic. 91%, so almost the entire body that we surveyed, said that they are increasing their investment in automation. If you just think about this, like, automation has been a theme, when we talk about Industry 4.0, but every company is almost saying, like, how do I go faster? And it's this question of, like, how can I increase? Where 77%, so almost 3/4, say they're increasing dramatically here. It sounds like, John, this couldn't be more true in your world. Maybe I'll start with Michelle, though, and talking about that, I think Amazon actually is a guiding light for a lot of companies of what automation means. So maybe, Michelle, could you kick us off? Like, what is automation at Amazon? How do you all think about this in terms of supply chain, and what advice would you give to other companies, who are looking at automation in their businesses?
I think the opportunity is trying to understand where can I apply automation. To me, the process side is getting really interesting, especially where you have repeatable processes, manual mistakes, a lot of people participating in those processes. They are typically ripe for automation. Some companies start on the back office side because it's easy, and some companies are starting in supply chain. I think in our example, or in Amazon's example, automation beyond our plant floors is it starts with forecasting, which then drives the workforce plan, which drives sourcing, which drives inventory placement and optimization, our production plan, and first and third party logistics. Those are automated processes, for Amazon, because they have to be, because the volume is crazy, right? So it can't be Bob, Peggy, and Sue trying to look through orders coming in. So those are certainly ripe. Those are some examples. And I see, customers of ours becoming more and more interested in trying to drive that. And it's also back to the comments we had about, the lack of people joining, manufacturing today, where they're hard to come by. That's not only a plant floor issue, it's a general issue. 10, 15, 20 years ago, I grew up in Sweden. Everybody wanted, newly minted engineers all wanted to work for Ericsson. Of course, right? Or Electrolux, or SKF, or Atlas Copco, or ABB. Nowadays, that's harder, right? So the necessity of driving automation, where you are currently supported by manual processes, is certainly there for the taking. I'd make one more comment on that, Dave, and that is, if you think about the tools you have, the systems and applications that you have that support processes, ERP, customer, relationship management, supply chain, et cetera, they're mostly based on, people performing a certain step of a function. And today, I think if you look at a traditional ERP package or other applications of that sort, systems of records, they're not going to go away because you may be audited, it's regulatory reasons and so on and so forth. But a lot of those are probably, I'm saying between 60 and 70% are very repeatable, which means if I have data and it's in reasonable shape, I can probably automate a big chunk of that. Cool. And drive accuracy.
I think that's a great suggestion. You have systems in place for software. There's probably even more workflow improvement here. I'd like to actually go to Jake next, which is, if we take the giant view, which is Amazon, of how they think about automation, what are some tactical things, Jake, you're seeing at the shop floor level, for small manufacturers? Like what should folks listening to this be thinking about when you hear adopt automation?
So I think we're actually going to tie back into the supply chain for a second, Dave. And it goes back to the idea of John saying, well, I can look at my cell phone and that is 5 blocks away from receiving that package. It's the same way where manufacturers now are turning to automation, not necessarily in the manufacturing, the building sense, but the data-driven side. If we're looking at machine capability, OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, is one of the main drivers that a lot of companies use. But a lot of times that data is not even being stored somewhere or even being tracked. If I have, going back, if I have a backlog of 6 months, how do I actually know how long it's going to take for me to produce these parts? Because you might have a machine that has the capability of producing 120 parts per hour. It has that capability, but if you're running at 45% OEE for the past 5 months, you have no realistic knowledge of where you're at. So automation in manufacturing is not just this idea of robotics and automated equipment and robot cells and all that stuff. It's the data side as well that has been really pushing manufacturing, the idea of Industry 4.0 adoption. OEE monitoring and SCADA systems and going back to, ERP or MES, that's where a lot of automation is happening, is getting that data and actually understanding what your machine is doing and capable of on the factory floor.
Yeah.
Where are your e-stops happening? If you have machine downtime all the time, why is that e-stop being pressed? Is that the same e-stop or is that a different e-stop? That knowledge is becoming more and more valuable to manufacturers to become more efficient with the
Yeah.
current capital product they have on their floor.
Yes.
The other thing within automation is the idea of going back to the addressing the labor shortage. And that's why when you look at the mobile industrial robot industry, if you ever have these graphs, maybe I can find one and you guys can post it later, Dave, or send out a follow-up email. But you look at this graph of robotics and manufacturing, the automation industry, and you see for the longest time, industrial robots, the idea of a SCARA or 6-axis robot has been the predominant, big guy in the idea of robotics. In the next 10 years, it's going to completely change in the world of automated robots. And, Michelle could speak of this with Amazon, but autonomous mobile robots, AGVs, AMRs, that is the future of robotics in the automation and manufacturing industry, because that's replacing or filling that gap, I should say, of the current labor shortage.
Yeah.
When companies are out there trying to move their current labor to a different area to fulfill a need, they're taking operators that were just moving product back and forth on a manufacturing floor all day long, or taking finished goods from machine A and then bringing them to the shipping area. And they were doing that 8 hours a day. Now you could take a robot and have that done automatically and actually be able to use that that current operator to maybe start up that machine that you currently can't even run right now. So automation is not just robotics, but it's the material handling side of mobile robotics that's really just going to be jumping dramatically over the next few years.
To
following
add, Jake,
kind
I'd
of
say,
what Amazon's done.
I'd add also cobots, where you're supplementing what a worker's doing, or like you said, one of the mobile robots, following a worker to help them be more efficient in their task, right? I think you're going to see this hybrid model of cobots, mobile robots supplementing, workers in some places where the tasks are maybe much more complex. They'll still get help from a robot helper. One thing I'd like to add on automation, I mean, we typically think of high volume. We've all probably seen a video clip of an automotive, welding robot, 100 of them welding something together. And what's exciting is the cost of those industrial robots that Jake talked about also has probably been halved, or even more than half the price of them in the last 10 years. And so areas like maybe aerospace, where the volumes are low and the mix of products is higher, it's starting to get very attractive to even apply these robots in places you might not traditionally have been able to apply them and have them make business sense.
And the one thing to add to that is automation is not the idea of replacing or moving workers away. Automation now is companies saying, how can robots work alongside operators? That's where the evolution of this future idea of automation and manufacturing is really changing, is coexisting with each other. And because that's what's going to have to happen. I don't see this idea of they're saying robots will be replacing everyone's jobs and everything's be robot made. That's not going to happen, at least in my lifetime and my kids' lifetime. The cooperation between the existing worker and robot is the future, with cobots and AMRs and floor robots.
Yeah, so I think we could definitely talk about this topic. There's a lot of questions coming in, so I want to move to our last major topic here before we go, so we can get to the questions. So let's touch on this, not to leave it short, but sustainability is a big focus. And I think this year we saw an increase, 68% of executives, so 2/3 are saying it's the importance of sustainability is really increasing at the corporate level. I'll just add for fictive, last year we launched our first carbon neutral offset program, and the demand for this came from our customers. It's actually our customers as well as employees saying, I want to work at a company that focuses on green. And our customers saying, I want to buy products which have less carbon footprint. I'd love to just hear, maybe we'll touch on it briefly, John, just with yourself, and then we'll move to Q&A. but what's Honeywell's kind of approach on sustainability? How are you guys thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is important, an important area of being a good corporate citizen, right? And I am excited at Honeywell. Our top leadership has made a commitment to being net carbon neutral as well. We have a plan in place, and we're driving our strategic plans to meet that. But what resonated with what you said, Dave, I really am excited that it's not just driven by our strategy's leadership, but a lot of energy from employees. And I agree, really, can you attract talent? Because my employees care, I care about it, my employees care about this. So it really is good alignment between getting your workforce engaged and energized, as well as, helping the planet, right, every day in our business. So
Yeah.
I think hand in hand, if a company's doesn't have a strategic plan or an action plan around this, then they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I think it's a good call to arms for everyone listening here. If you want to read more about this, please download the report. There's some great data and I think links to initiatives for how you all can do this. Let's move to the Q&A in our last 15 minutes here. We have so many questions that's come in. I'm going to grab from the top maybe first, and then Christine, if you can help pull some of these. So this is from Matt. I'm curious how 3D printing is making it into production. Is it still just seen as a prototyping tool, or are these parts finally making it to real builds? Is there, do you need to greatly modify your analysis for 3D printed parts, versus traditional casted or machine components? Maybe John, as much as you're able to talk about this, without too much IP here, how are you thinking about additive in production? Is this a real thing for aerospace?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've gotten a certain number of parts into production. There's certain sweet spots, right? Let's say we talked about life cycle of products earlier in this discussion, and we have some engines that are on aircraft that might have been designed 50 years ago, right? And we still have customers that expect us to support those aircraft. And so, the molds may not even exist to build some of these parts anymore with the traditional casting, right? So we are using additive to put production parts on aircraft, obviously following all the regulatory requirements as well as our customer approvals to get those in place. And I think that's really insightful there, that we need to, for us, it's make sure the right analysis is done. And sometimes it's maybe as much rigor as a cast part. Frequently, it's the same, looking at how, a cast part has certain flow dynamics going on. And we need to make sure that when you build an additive part, like Jake talked about, slice by slice, that you still have that same structural integrity of the part and will work in the environment or that application just like a cast part. So there definitely is a lot of effort around this, and you got to be thorough when you do it, but we are doing it.
Cool. I think that's great. Maybe I'll ask this, Michelle, I'll take this one, but I think Jake or everyone can talk about it. This is from Valentina. What automation tools are available to offload supply chains manual work today to make things more efficient? Are there some specific resources you would point towards, Michelle, Jake, John, on the automation side?
Well, I think on the technology side of this, there's a lot of capabilities available. I see a lot of my customers trying to perfect their demand forecast accuracy, and I think the industry average is, in manufacturing is roughly around 60%, in accurately predicting, customer demand for their product or service or mix. And tools like Amazon Forecast, and then kind of interjecting the output of that into to SAP's planning tools as an example, or whatever planning tool you may be running, kind of starts to cater for those types of opportunities. But for us, it's typically it starts in on the demand side of the equation, and then the applicability of the output. So if I go from 60% accuracy to, let's say, 85 or 90% accuracy, well, what does that mean to my inventory holding positions? What does that mean to my, how many, what should my shift schedule be? How many workers do I need to fulfill that, that demand? What should my optimized production plan look like? My logistics plan look like? and so on and so forth. But it needs to start with a very accurate, signal of what what demand is. Otherwise, we just create a compounding problem across our suppliers, across production, across our financial health when it comes to inventory positions, especially with in expensive parts and raw materials. So plenty of tools and solutions there. I think the good news is, if you start in that end, you're not replacing your application portfolio. You're just ingesting intelligence into it, more accurate data into it, so that the process can execute when it's fed that information. But then another consequence of that is I'm probably skipping a number of steps that are manually defined. As I look at the let's say a sourcing process, I'm skipping a number of those steps. I'm just taking an output of an accurate demand signal and saying, hey, I know what contracts I have against which suppliers. I know the volume, the quality, where it needs to be shipped. Hitting those contracts, then just automate that and just make the purchase order happen. So there's a lot of opportunity for automation. Back to that topic, across your supply chain.
Cool. I think that's great. I'll grab another one here. This is from Himanshu. Many companies consider that on-demand manufacturing is only good for small lots, not for large-scale production. That large-scale production or production parts is better done with just a local vendor. Jake, John, would love to give your opinion. I'll start off on the fictive side. I actually think a lot of people, it's a misconception that on-demand is only for prototyping. I think that that's where it started. But this idea of producing on demand, leveraging idle capacity with really strong quality management systems, I think enables production work to be done as well. Maybe Jake, I'll go to you, and then John would love to know, do you guys agree with this? Is on demand just for prototyping, or do you see a place in production as well?
I mean, I see a place in production as well. I see lots out there of 10 to 100,000 in size being done with on-demand production. You got to remember that in the current state we're in, local suppliers might not always be the best choice when it comes to, I'm going to buy within my territory. And I'm not saying go overseas and buy stuff. What I'm saying is, look at your capability and opportunity, in your region, because so many companies are backlogged right now in terms of capability. And you look at, I can buy this from a supplier, but are they going to be the best supplier that's going to meet your demand and your time and the schedule that you needed to receive? You talk about production resiliency and manufacturing resiliency. How are you as a company adapting to that, where, the local supplier's there, but can they keep up with your demand down the road? If you were to have another pandemic and we were to have, hopefully not, but let's say COVID got really bad again with a new string, and, we went into another shutdown later this fall, how is your company resilient to that? And I think on-demand production is one of those that is filling that gap because of the network that's available.
Yeah, just to add, Jake, I would say, in my experience, have a plan for every part, right? And to your point, even if you had a local supplier, where are their sub-tier suppliers? They may be on the other side of the world, and that may be a concern too. So I think you've got to really look at each part. And to your point, Dave, one person's a view of what's high production and another person's low production, may be the same thing. So I think you guys got to plan for every part. And I think one of those things you think about for when you plan for every part, that supply chain, is volatility. Right. So just having someone in region, but if they can only build X number a day, and you may spike up to double that, maybe there's a hybrid strategy of having two suppliers, maybe one local and one on demand possibly, right? I mean, you really got to look at it part by part.
I'm sure that discussion's happening a lot right now in the automotive industry about supplier resiliency.
Well, that's exactly where on-demand fills the role. Is on-demand doesn't mean a lack of quality or a lack of processes. On-demand just means resiliency. It's saying, hey, there's an available supplier here that fits all of the set of criteria, whether it's aero or it's auto or it's medical, and you can do that in a production setting where quality is the focus. I couldn't agree more. Michelle, if you have a quick point, we have a whole bunch of questions, or did you
Yeah,
want to?
I actually wanted to tie into one of the questions and pick up on what John said. It's Ramesh questions about small manufacturers. John works with, a multitude of suppliers, and they have suppliers and they have suppliers, right? At the end of the road, it's going to be a, tier N supplier with, a family-owned company.
Yep.
And I think the efforts that large companies do in digital transformation, Industry 4.0, call it your favorite buzzword, whatever that may be, you have to think about a templatized approach where everyone benefits, right? So it's not just, hey, I want visibility into what you have and what you can make and by when. It's also sharing, because here's what I see around the corner, right? This is the demand for my product or these specific parts. So we have to think in a templatized way. So you democratize this type of technology and make everybody a part of it. And I think that's part of what large organizations will partially be on the hook for.
Yeah, I think that's great, and couldn't agree more. We'll try to get two more, but I think this one might be meaty. This is from Justin. Let's talk about workforce development, the current skill gap, generational gap, and upcoming waves of retirements. How can we as an industry adapt a less labor availability as we attract talent from upcoming generations, but we look at a more diverse labor market? What's John, maybe I'll just ask you first. You guys have been around 100 years. It's not like you're going to just go away, but there definitely is more pressure on the labor market that you've ever seen before. Any opinions on how you think about workforce development?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and we've been identifying, I think, some basic things you need to think about here is, and obviously we have a lot of capability, and people who have that 30-year experience in aerospace, for example, are retiring, right? And but what I'm really excited about is the new hires coming in. I mean, the engineers I've met around the world are outstanding, and so I'm so excited to get this new generation of team members to join us as well. But you've got to have a very, I'll say, structured approach to building the capability in your teams. What are the key skills that you want to develop around the world? Put in some common way of assessing that skill, identifying those key learnings they need to have around the world to grow their capability, and put those in place, I would say, in a formal structure. Train the people in those critical skills first, right? Somehow, for example, in this environment, we're prioritizing digitization and automation. We need every manufacturing engineer in Honeywell to start thinking about how to grab that information and use it in a new way and drive a new solution. And at the same time, some of our old processes and tools take that let's say heavy administrative stuff and automate that, like Jake talked about earlier. So those are some of the things we're doing, but you've got to identify those critical skills gaps, start there, and partner with a supplier or develop the course internally with some of your experts, and then offer that to all the remaining work team members that you have. Those are some themes there that we're driving in a big way.
I appreciate the advice, and I think it's really strong, and hopefully other people can apply it to their businesses and work as well. I'm gonna close this out here with the last question. Thank you, Matt, for the tee up on this. But Matt said, appreciate the panel and everyone's contributions. Seeing how this is a Fictive webinar, we are hosting this. How is Fictive working towards helping companies with resiliency, automation, and some of these problems that we mentioned? I'll take that one to kind of close us out. We see ourselves as the center of a lot of this transformation that's happening. We have some answers to these questions, but it's really about us bringing in experts in the software world like Amazon and Michelle, thank you, from the manufacturing world, Jake, thinking about automation, and then also from the OEM and large enterprise and aerospace, John from Honeywell. I think that connecting all of these dots together is a big role I think Fictive plays. I think the second one, which I'll just mention, is that there's two things that we're world-class at here at Fictive. One is technology. So how do we write software and drive automation through that? But then the second thing is manufacturing operations. It's the people aspect that I think allows our manufacturing ecosystem to run. So we think the best automation is human plus machine. How do we have software tools that allows our people to go faster? And those people can be manufacturing engineers on John's teams that are doing old casted parts that they're now 3D printing or doing machining, or it can be the people that Jake has talked about on the manufacturing floor, where we're taking local suppliers and we're giving them software to automate their workflows. I think that this is a critical role that Fictive plays in helping drive this. And so I think for all the attendees here watching, a big thank you, Michelle, John, and Jake, for this. It's really been a great conversation. So thank you, everyone. And Christine, to the marketing team for 6 years in a row of doing this survey. Wow, I know how much work it takes, but you all are rock stars. So thank you for setting this up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And thank you again to our panel of experts for weighing in on the state of manufacturing in today's discussion. And thank you so much to our audience for attending and engaging with all your fantastic questions. So we're going to be sharing out the recording from today's discussion, as well as a copy of the full state of manufacturing report. So look out for that in your email. And if this conversation about automation and digital transformation has sparked interest in what tools and solutions might help your team achieve your digital transformation goals, we invite you to learn more about Fictive's digital manufacturing ecosystem for custom manufacturing on demand at fictive.com.
Cool.
So thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank
folks.
you. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
Everyone.
All right, take care. Thank you. Bye.